Hi everybody again, Shlomo here. We have a sunny day, so I'm here trying to make a video. And as I promised, this is going to be part 2 to the first video about creating reality in a bubble. But before we go there, I want to talk to you about some interesting observations. As usual, I really like to get your feedback on it, because this whole thing is about me and you having a discussion. And I guess the video way is probably the perfect way today to do it with the corona and a very large group of people. So see, when I watch a video on YouTube, I always look, why was that video made? What was the purpose of the person or people who made that video? And that gives me right away the idea if I want to watch that video or not. So based on that, I'm going to tell you why I create my videos. So the main reason is I want to attract, and I think that I'm succeeding in doing so, people who are spiritual, who are open-minded, and people who can sit down together with me as if we were actually in a live meeting, and listen to what I have to say and then provide feedback. So it's an exchange, because if that doesn't happen, then I basically end up being in my own echo chamber. And what that means that I listen only to myself and to things that correspond to my ideas, and that way I don't really get anywhere. So as you can see from this, is that your feedback is really essential, and I will always do my best to respond to you as soon as I can, either here or in the messages you all send me. See, a funny observation I made a long time ago is that we all work very hard to be as healthy, as beautiful, and as rich before we die, or just before we die. Because of that, I want to talk about death, but not in a grim or dark way. I want to actually tell you what I think, and maybe it's more than think, about death and what happens after death, or what people call life after death. It depends how you define life. So, and nothing religious here, okay? So what happens is that when a person dies, their identity and their consciousness does not die. But what dies is anything material. So you can equate it to looking through a one-way mirror. So after a person dies, they can see and sense and feel, more so sense and feel. And when I say see, it's not with their eyes, but since the eyes are connected to your consciousness, you can see directly with your consciousness. So you basically stand behind this one-way mirror, and you can see and sense and feel everything that happens in this reality here. Of course, getting there, you go through what we call the NDE, and some people, that's the corridor really between life and death, and many people don't cross it all the way. They come back and they always have the same experience. So that kind of explains what this near-death experience is. So once you are over there on the other side of the mirror, you can relive everything that ever happened to you in this reality here in a very, very clear way. You can take any experience, any adventure, anything that happened to you here, and you can relive it in your mind. It's basically very similar to when I talk about God and God dreaming this whole reality. So you can do the same thing, but you can only relive things that you have done here. You cannot create any more new experiences. And you can not only see with your consciousness, but you can actually see what people think. You can see the whole behind the scene thing that we cannot see when we are here. Sometimes we feel it through our sixth sense, but from there, it's all about your sixth sense. And very important to mention that you are there as long as people remember you here. Once your memory is gone, nobody remembers you, you are gone. Then you really die. You just reconnect to God and you disappear as an individual entity. And when you think about heaven and hell, this is what it is. You see, if you are remembered here, say take people, again, I always use Hitler as an example, he will always be remembered, and he will be remembered in a bad way. So for this kind of a person, this is hell, because it never ends. They're always there, and they always, because once you get there, you don't have any ego, you see things basically in a totally neutral way, totally independent. So if you have done many bad things, you see the consequences, and you see exactly what you have done. And this is what you live with over there. Again, I'm using the word live, but this is what you exist with over there. So this is your hell. And the opposite is also true. If you take somebody who is remembered in a good way, then they have heaven, because they will stay there forever, or at least as long as people remember them here, and that can be thousands of years if you take people from the Bible, for example. And all you see and feel and experience is good. So this is your heaven. One more thing I want to mention is that while you are there, as I said, it's a one-way mirror, but there are some exceptions. You can actually connect with individuals here who have that ability, like mediums that can connect to that dimension, and sometimes they can pass you some messages, or you can pass some messages through them. So that is something that can happen. We have an example of that in the Bible, actually, where Saul, the king Saul, is he feels that he's gonna die, that he's going to lose the war against the Palestinians, or whatever you call them, and he goes to this medium woman, and she connects him with Samuel, which was the prophet, and who died. So that's an example of this kind of a process of experience. You know, a funny thing is that everything you perceive with your five senses needs proof. But things that you perceive with your sixth sense don't. They don't need a proof. You know they are true. So let me go to a different topic here. Again, an observation. And this has to do with the free will. So Imagine you are driving a car and that's your life. Everything that's out of that car or even in the car, except the steering wheel and the gas pedal, can be manipulated for you by God, by the universe, call it whatever you like. But God cannot or does not want to touch your steering wheel or your gas pedal. Only you can do that. What it does do is presents you with all kinds of scenarios and situations that may force you to either hit the brake or turn the steering wheel, but it's still your free will. You are the only one that can do it. And the way God does it is always through nature, right? Okay, here I need to add something. Need to add example. Okay. Now another topic that I wanted to talk to you about, again, observation, and this one I actually experienced, is that I always have that conflict, and I think it's always been around, is that does God know the future? And if God knows the future, then it means that everything I do is basically programmed, like I'm kind of a robot that it's already been known in advance. So does God know the future? And not only that, there are people, psychics and so on, and I'll tell you about one that I experienced, that actually know the future. So how can that be? Where is my free will? So here is the explanation I came up with. God does not know the future, and neither do the psychics. But the future, or the reality, our reality, is created by people. And it's created by what people think. They think, and then they create a reality, right? So both God, I guess God to a much greater extent, and psychics, they can see what people think. They can sense, see what people think. And I'll give you an example of something that actually happened to me. In 2001, just before the 9/11, in September, I was in Israel, and I was in a meeting with one of those psychics. Actually, it's the one that I talked about in my some other videos that brought me into this whole world of spirituality, call it. And in that meeting, he was speaking, and all of a sudden, he panicked, and he raised his hands, and he said, "I see airplanes hitting buildings." And he was shouting. And that was about 12 hours before 9/11 happened. So I always wondered, this is actually what made me wonder, how is it that he knew the future? But he didn't know the future. Here is what happens. In this particular event, right, there was a group of terrorists, and their leader's name was Atta, I think. They went to this flight school, and they prepared, and they spent probably many months preparing this whole event, right? Now, on the other hand, across from them are all the bodies and people that are in charge of preventing things like this, right? So what the psychic saw and how he was aiming to this, that's a different story for a different video. But what he saw that the reality that the terrorists created is so advanced and so ready to go that the people who are in charge of preventing it, of which he can also see their thoughts and what reality they create, they are past the point of no return. All this whole scenario is past the point of no return. You can see that this is going to happen 99.9%. Now, why not 100%? Because human nature is unpredictable. So Atta, who was the leader of that terrorist group, could actually change his mind in the last minute and not do it. So that can always happen. And that's why psychics are not always right, because they can see the thinking that creates the reality. But the thinker can always surprise. Okay? That's an interesting observation about predictability and does God or anybody else know the future. So no, they don't. But they can see what people think. Okay, now we can go back to the bubbles and deal with the part 2 of this video. So let me give you some more examples of what bubbles are. One of the most powerful and sealed bubbles is a person who is in a rage. A person who is in a rage is in a bubble that's completely sealed. Sometimes he can kill somebody without ever thinking about the consequences, even though they know the consequences. But when they are in that bubble of the rage, nothing affects them. And by the way, Vipassana was developed and invented to deal with these situations. In Vipassana, they teach you and train you how to deal with it, not with your brain, but with your body, because your brain cannot deal with it anymore in that particular bubble. Now, I'll give you an example of another bubble, and you probably know that one extremely well. The stock market. The stock market is a big bubble. Almost everybody is in it, right? Why is it a bubble? Because the shares you buy have absolutely no value. It's not like in the old days when they started this whole thing, when you became a partner in a company, a silent partner, non-active, but you were a partner. You could go there and if you had 10% of the company, you had 10% of the company. You could go there and talk to the owner and tell him, I don't like your company anymore. Either you pay me out or I want 10% of your company. Give me the chairs and the tables, right? Well, today, the only value in the shares is how much somebody else wants to pay for them. How much somebody else is willing to pay for the shares you purchased. If that bubble bursts and people say, oh, wait a minute, it has no value, then anything you own is totally useless and worthless. You cannot go to the company with it. Okay, so that's another example of a bubble, and just I will share with you my opinion. This is going to happen, just a matter of time. Another bubble is, maybe I can call it politics, the whole world. Look in a logical way at this situation. You have, for example, Russia and the US, right? So the United States spends 57% of their annual budget on defense. 57%. You can check that and it will shock you. Health gets, I think, 7%. Education gets 6 or 8%. I don't remember. But the defense budget is 57% of the whole thing. Now, the question is asked, before China and Iran and maybe other countries came into this equation, if you go 50 years back or so, then this budget was basically exclusively against Russia. And then Russia doesn't spend 57%, but it spends a very large amount. Like they don't advertise, so you cannot really find out. But they also spend a huge amount of money defending themselves against the United States. And in the old days, it was capitalism against communism or socialism, right? But if you look at it today, if you took a representative group of Russian people and a representative group of American people and put them in one room, except the language, they don't have any differences. They are white people. They all want iPhones and cars. They are all educated more or less in the same way. There would be no, if you take away the conflict between the countries, there's no conflict between the people. There's absolutely no conflict. If Russia and the US could basically unite tomorrow, become one country like the European Union, and that would work because the people are very, very similar. So why is it that they spend all this money to destroy the other one? Well, that's a bubble. They live in a bubble in which they got brainwashed and they believe that the other one is going to destroy them. So this is a bubble, you see? A bubble which is sealed so well that all these years it doesn't open up, it doesn't burst. Now let's talk about the sealing of the bubble. Another aspect of the sealing, which I didn't discuss in my last video and is extremely important, is that you have to seal the bubble from yourself as well, from your doubts. Not only from the outside world, but also from your own doubts. Because if you doubt whatever you're going to do, whatever reality you want to create, it's not going to happen. So the seal has also deal with your own doubts. Now keep in mind that the best way to seal and continue to keep the seal is actually through the action. Because as soon as you start acting on your concept, your idea, then the feedback you get will always enforce the seal more and more and more until the point where you succeed in what you're doing, and obviously then it's real. So you don't need the seal anymore. Like if you for example think about Amazon, I happened to actually go and visit Bezos in Seattle when he started the company, because I was looking to do something similar as well, and he was in 2 or 3 rooms in a building in Seattle. And if you look at the process, I am sure that in his mind, he probably had his doubts when he started, right? He was selling books and there is other companies selling books and so on. But as he progressed and the thing was more and more successful, it was easier for him to seal himself and eventually actually create the reality which today we call Amazon. It's also worth noting that the further your content, your idea is from the current reality, the harder it is to seal the bubble, okay? Because if you try to create a reality which is exactly like the one that's out here right now, then it's no big deal to seal it, right? But if you're trying to create a reality where the sky is always pink, well, that becomes very hard. Also worth mentioning again that some people live in a bubble, and for them it's extremely easy. I would put in this category, for example, Donald Trump. He always lived in his own bubble. So for him to create that bubble, that he's the president, it was much easier than for somebody that does not live in a bubble and actually lives in the general reality. Now, the next part is taking action. So what you want to put into the bubble, right? So I would give you a practical way to do that, because many people asked me how to do that. And what I would do, once I decided what I want to achieve, I would make a list of all the ways that I can think about how it can be done. And it can be totally crazy, imaginary, far-fetched, doesn't matter. Make a list of 10 ways how it can be done. Don't have to be logical, don't have to make sense, nothing. And then pick the one that is the closest one to what you feel that you can achieve. Again, they all can be crazy, but pick the one that makes the most sense to you. Okay, so that's how you decide how to put that content in the bubble. And I'll give you an example how important action is. I came to Canada back in 1977 with the intention to stay here, even though I didn't have the proper documentation. I came in as a tourist, but I decided that I want to stay here. That was my intention. And it was far-fetched because it's very hard to go into, especially into Canada, and unless you get married with somebody locally, then it's just almost impossible to become a permanent resident here or a refugee. And a couple days after I arrived, keep in mind that my English was very, very basic, and I stayed at a friend's apartment, and they received a newspaper there, and my work in Israel before I came here, I was a technician. I was very good at fixing two-way radios and equipment like that. So I looked in the newspaper in Montreal. It was called the Montreal Star, I think. Doesn't exist anymore. And I looked at the section where they look for technicians. And I found a company called Scottcom looking for a two-way radio technician. Well, keep in mind, I have no papers, no social security, nothing. I am a tourist. So I called the number. Now, this is taking action, right? And somebody answered on the other end in French, which I don't speak at all, not even today, after I lived there for 6 years. And I said, English? He said, oh, sure, okay. I said, oh, I saw your advertisement in the paper. And the person said, yes, we are looking for a technician, da-da-da-da-da. If you want, that was a Friday. He said, if you want to get the job, you have to come today because we have to have that person by Monday. And he gave me the address, which I wrote down on a piece of paper. And I hung up. I went, I took a bus. I looked, those days there was no Google or iPhone. I looked on the maps. I took a bus and I went to that place. Small company, maybe 30 people in a shopping center. And you know what? I got the job. No papers. Maybe I'll tell you that story in a different video. It's a long one. But the bottom line is I got the job, and the job actually, the people that gave me the job from Scottcom arranged for me to get my permanent resident in Canada. So I always say to myself, this one phone call changed my whole reality, my whole future. It brought to this world new people that wouldn't have been around otherwise. Just think about it, what action can do. Okay? Now, another thing I want to share with you, and I know I'm jumping from topic to topic, but I believe you like it. And what I want to talk about, oh, this really went back. Okay. I want to share with you something from the Bible, from the 5 books of Moses, the Old Testament, call it whatever you like. And it's not for religion, it's actually for a practical reason. You see, there is a passage in the Torah where the Israelites are in the desert, been in the desert for many years now, and all they eat is the manna, which is some kind of a bread that comes from the sky, and they get sick and tired of it, and I don't blame them. And they come to Moses and say, we want meat. We want meat. We haven't eaten meat in so many years. Our mouth, everything is kind of like, we are bored, we cannot stand it anymore. Give us meat. And Moses, he goes to God. Of course, God knows already. And says, they want meat. And God says, okay, tomorrow morning we'll get the meat. And Moses looks at God, I guess, I don't know if you can see God, and he says to God, where are you going to bring the meat from? There's 600,000 only the men, and probably with everybody else those days, you're looking at 2 million people, and he says to God, how are you going to give them meat? Even if you slaughtered all the cattle we have, there is not enough meat. And God says to Moses, and this is, by the way, in Numbers 11:23, if you want to read it for yourself. God says to Moses in a translation, he says, is God's hand too short? Meaning, God, do you believe God cannot deliver? And why I brought it up to you is two things you can take away from this. Number one, Moses, who was the closest man that ever lived, the closest to God, did not believe God can deliver. So when you have doubts, don't blame yourself, because Moses did. And the second thing is that the universe, or whatever you like to call it, God, universe, infinity, can always deliver. Don't doubt that part, okay? So those two things. Don't blame yourself for doubting, and don't doubt that it can be delivered. And that's why I brought you this example here. Now, I want to touch again quickly on this sharp turn, because many people asked, like, how do I do this sharp turn? And I will give you, I'll tell you a story that happened to me. Maybe it will kind of shed light on this idea. So that's about 8 years ago. I actually went with a friend to Vietnam, spent 3 weeks in Vietnam, and while I was in Vietnam, my saliva gland here on the left started swelling. It became very hard and was a bit painful. And I didn't think much of it, but I came home and that went on for a few months and it got only worse. Well, you always think the worst, and that started to really worry me, so I went to see my GP, my doctor, and I'll make the story I'll try to make it short. I went through few specialists. I did all kind of tests, and they couldn't really figure out what it is. So eventually, they sent me to somebody who sits in a hospital here, and his specialty is those glands. That's all he does. So I went there. I had an appointment. I went there. He looked at all looked at the file of what transpired till this point, and then he kind of touched it, squeezed it, looked inside my mouth, and he said to me, look, you have a tumor, and since you have 2 glands, in my opinion, we should remove it right away. That's the safest and best way to proceed. So here's your sharp turn. I got up and left. I didn't say anything. He looked at me like, what's wrong with this guy? I just got up and I left. I went home. Don't ask me why. I just didn't like the way he made that decision. It's like, I figured, well, it doesn't matter what I figured, but anyway, the next day I get a phone call from my own doctor, and he says to me, what happened? I got a call from this specialist, you walked away, da. And I said, look, how does he know I have a tumor? Like, where did he pick that from? I didn't have a biopsy, I didn't have anything. So why would he say that I have a tumor? I don't really want to deal with him. So he says to me, look, he suggested that you go do a CT scan, which I didn't do before, and in the same hospital, and then come see him again. Well, I don't know why. I said, fine, I'll do it. So I went a couple days later. I had a CT scan, and then I went to see the same person, and it's a teaching hospital, so this time he had a student with him, and he looked at the thing, and he looked at me. He didn't touch me even. He said, you know what? If it doesn't bother you enough, why don't we just leave it and see what happens? Very different, eh? And I said to him, doctor, now I like you. And the funny thing is, I went home, and after a week or 10 days, the whole thing disappeared. And I also found out that he was looking at my profile on LinkedIn and some other places. So this is a sharp turn, because not turning would have been proceeding with this thing, with this specialist. He's like one of a kind, I think, in all of Western Canada. And usually you would trust this kind of a person. He's got lots of experience. We have this file with the ultrasound and other things that I did. And if you went with that reality, most likely it would have been a tumor. But this sharp turn put me into a totally different reality. So that's for you to consider, if you run into this kind of a situations. But it always takes huge risk. A sharp turn means taking a huge risk. There is no two ways about it. And, it doesn't work for everybody. Even if you look at the world also makes sharp turns. Like if you look at World War I, World War II, that was a sharp turn that one person actually took, or a group of people, and took the whole world with them and created a totally new reality. I hope we don't have another one like this. Okay, now we're at the end of the video. I just want to mention again that, there's one more thing I wanted to talk about. That's very important, at least I think so. But you take it whichever way you like. So you see, I always like to quote Vadim Zeland, that says that the ultimate secret, the biggest, more important secret in the whole universe, is right in front of our eyes. And we don't see it because it's hidden right on the surface. I think I discovered that, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I'll tell you something. In one of my videos here on the channel, there's I think 19 or 20 of them, I actually talk about that secret. And till this day, nobody noticed. It's hidden right in front of your eyes. But it is in one of my videos here. And it's a mind-blowing thing. So I'll leave it there. Okay? It's something to ponder before I go. Every time we encounter a fork in the road, and that happens a few times a day. Should I go this way or go that way? Should I buy this bread or buy that bread? Right? What would happen if you could actually know what would happen with the other alternative that you didn't choose, the one you didn't pick? What would happen if you knew, if you could tell what the result would be there? How would that affect your life? Would you see more miracles or more failures? What do you think? All right, so again, I am available. You can either find me on talkforlife.com, and I now provide counseling in limited time, but I do it. I do it for free for people in distress, and I charge for everybody else. And I also am reopening in the next 2 weeks the Healing Olive project, but this time it will be for a fee. All right, so all the best to you, and I will see you this time probably much sooner than normal, because I have so many things I want to talk about. It's just to putting them in a proper order, and I'll be back here. So thank you for watching, and see you soon.